Okay, and we're live. So, at the end of the last stream, I had built up a spacecraft that was going to be our first shot at orbit, and we'd gotten the initial framework of the software going, and we launched, and it didn't have any launch authority. It couldn't control our attitude. And I kind of grumbled a bit. So I spent a couple of days just kind of doing this iterative try something and have it explode, try something and have it explode over and over and over again. But in the end, I was able to identify some things that needed to be done, and I was able to correct the deficiencies. The first thing, of course, was to get some control over that spacecraft. That was simple enough. I tightened up the spacecraft a bit and put some fins on the bottom that had some capability to steer the craft, and Bob's your uncle. Second problem was that I didn't have enough fuel. And trying to get enough fuel tanks onto it to do what I want to do ran me out of part count. And part count is upgraded by doing that, and that's expensive. You can see I've spent some. I did go overweight, and I went from the small craft up to I need something larger. Upgrading the launch pad when you start to go orbital is perfectly fine. Now that got us up to being able to go 36 meters high and a max vehicle weight of 140 tons. I seem to remember this being enough to get to the moon. The other thing I did was upgraded the astronaut complex so that we can now perform EVAs and place flags. So if we had to, we could do various shots around Kerbin. We could gather science over various biomes. We go into orbit. Where we land, we can place flags, so we can watch. If we have a script that explicitly has a full mission trajectory, we can see how repeatable it is by planting flags where we end up. So that sort of thing. Kind of no real game mechanic around that. It's not like we get extra science for planting a flag, but it's kind of cool to be able to see, okay, we ran this mission profile 10 times, and we landed within this area. Check our precision. Some of the things we're doing in the flight path, we're checking periodically, so there's going to be some variation. I don't worry about that too much. The important thing is that if we start doing powered landings like we're going to have to do on the moon, the precision will come in how can we get it so that when we touch down we're not, it's not crashing. Anyway, so returning to the job at hand, I identified 4 things I want to do to the code to support future missions, and I want to get them done soonish because our missions are starting to get long enough that we may have a reboot in the middle, and some of this is going to be important. So, transferring science, that's automatically moving science, automatically running experiments and moving the science into the storage. This is a nice to have. I can do this by hand for a while, and at some point we'll turn this on and I will set up code in kOS to automatically do it. But it doesn't need to be done before the next mission. I want to gather ascent telemetry. There's some parts that we want to test. There's some parts contracts. We can earn money by testing parts. And if I know how fast we're going at what altitudes, we can look at this part that says you have to be going faster than this, slower than this, and within these altitude ranges. I can look at our ascent. I can say, hey, during ascent, when we get there, I can test this. And then I can put some code in to the flight software that says, when we satisfy those conditions, test the part. And we'll get a part test out of it. And that's cool. Well, that's free money. We'll want descent telemetry. Same thing. Descent is going to be a different balance of speed versus altitude. And that's something we can actually modify. So we could set up a profile that has a descent trajectory that provides us with numbers that hit different contract. So we could have a contract that maybe we have to mess up with our descent to get going. But here's the big one. I want to persist data across reboots. This way, if we're in ascent and we reboot the craft, I want us to come back up, and when we boot, we say, oh, we are in the ascent phase, so let's follow the ascent trajectory and continue with our flight plan from there. If we're on orbit, I want to come up and say, oh, we're on orbit, we're waiting for a user input, or we're on orbit, we've waited for the user input, and we were going to deorbit. And if we're deorbiting, I want us to pop up and say, oh, we're deorbiting, and I want us to remember whether we have done our burns or not. I want us to remember where we were, so we don't say, we see that we're at 40,000 meters, and we don't immediately say we're ascending. So we can't look at our current vehicle state and infer where in the flight plan we are. We have to store that. Second thing is, when we're storing telemetry, it's really nice if we can do it by mission elapsed time. I couldn't find mission elapsed time in the kOS source code. I can find timestamps, and I can find time durations. Oh, good on you guys for splitting those apart. An absolute timestamp is a different object than a duration. We often use a duration from a designated epoch as being the absolute time, and that implicitly makes everywhere you use absolute time somehow aware of the epoch. Which is really cool because everybody in the world now uses the Unix epoch of, December 1st, early morning, midnight of the morning of December 1st of January 1970. Everybody knows that, but we have to know that. And for Kerbals, well, yeah, we're year 1, day 1, 5 hours, 9 minutes. I may forget to mute myself during a cough now and then. Don't worry about it. You might want to not have my microphone too loud in your ears. But, like I said, Kerbal has split those things. You now have a timestamp which says, here's your calendar, date and time, and so on. And apparently, that starts year 1, day 1. And a duration, its natural neutral value at 0 duration would be 0 years, 0 days, 0 minutes, hours, and seconds. Okay, so there's a difference as to how 0 is handled on both of them, because you don't start your calendar in year 0, day 0. We start our calendar in year 1, day 1. So they split. Yay! Nice change to kOS. Anyway, so we've got this neat system, but I couldn't find mission elapsed time in there, so we have to do it ourselves. And if we're going to do it ourselves, rather than mission elapsed time, which starts when we roll out to the launch pad, I'm going to store a time T0, which is the moment we fired our engines. So it's entirely viable that instead of sitting on the launch pad and waiting for the user to press a space bar, we may roll out, and at the time of rollout, when we boot, we may simply say, okay, we may have things we want to do in our flight plan before we launch, so we set T0 to a minute in the future. And now the launch script can say, when we hit T0, that's when we stage to fire the engines. That's cool. I need to make sure that our launch script can handle things like to launch, you need to stage to fire the engines, and then you need to wait briefly for the engines to gather up power, because some of the engines don't have immediate thrust. I seem to remember this. This might have been add-on. But fire the engines, delay briefly, and then release the launch comms. So we're going to have to look at that. The auto stager may handle that. If you stage the first time and the active things in the stage are just the launch clamps, the auto stager is going to come back in 2 seconds and say, oh, we don't have any fuel on the current stage, so blow it away. Oh, by the way, I forgot to mention we refactored some things. We'll go into that shortly. So yeah, so there's our big thing coming up, is to to support these collecting telemetry and using mission elapsed time, well, relative to launch, time relative to launch. We're going to talk about that because there is a thing in Kerbal called mission elapsed time. Okay, now from time to time my screen does things. Oh, right, I'm not in a mission, so I can't. I was going to switch this over to show MET versus UT. You don't have that when you're in this view because you're not relative to a mission. That's fine. Anyway, because we have universal time and mission elapsed time here, and what we're going to be logging in our telemetry is relative to the launch time, it's a separate thing. So we'll talk about launch time, or launch relative time, or time since launch, or just, I'll call it T. So mission T. Anyway, so we're going to be working on persisting data across reboots, as you see here on my engineering panel, my software engineering panel. Before we get into that, I do want to do a quick browse through of what got changed. I did some refactoring based on current needs. So some of the challenges I faced were that everything was still too big. And I thought, well, I could use compile to turn the KS files into KSM files, which are machine code, quote unquote. They're actually tokenized. And they'll get smaller. Surely they will get smaller. Because my remembrance was that my large scripts were getting much smaller. I thought, surely that is a way. Because when you have long variable names over here, surely you don't have that long name written out a bunch of times in the KSM file. You might have it once for debuggability or for linkage, but you won't have it a lot of times. You certainly don't have the comments or the white space, so surely it will get smaller. Well, it turns out for big files, they get smaller. But for these really small modules that I was writing, which are like 10 lines long, even if I put comments and white space and everything in there, the KSM file is still bigger. So there's something in the KSM file, there's some boilerplate that has to do with it being a KSM file. So there's probably a thing. You could probably put a mathematical equation describing, given a KSM file in a certain style, which includes variable naming and all that, versus the KS file with that style versus the KSM file. There's probably a relationship between them, and there's probably a certain point where they cross over. It'll depend on your style, of course. More white space means it's going to cross over earlier because that'll get compressed out. But what that does mean is that in practice, this collection of individual modules, each one of which doing one phase of flight, every one of them got a little bit bigger, including the ones that were problematic. Like set stage was getting fairly big. And even though I didn't store set stage locally after I ran it, it was still big. So it did a couple things. First of all, I combined it all together. So all of our phases of flight are going to live in one package called POF for phases of flight. And what I've said is that inside these braces, I'm going to have a function for each one. So this file is now fairly large. The export from it is a lexicon, which gives access to all of the methods in phases of flight. And I added an end method so I could specifically have a phase of flight called end. I'm looking forward to the day when all you do for a new flight is you just write out the name of the phase and the parameters for it. The name of the next phase and its parameters for it. We already do that in KS form, but we're going to have to do that in a way where when you boot, you can pick one by number. You could say start at phase 3 and have it follow along. So we're going to need some sort of mission sequencer. And eventually, that's long term. I haven't even opened an issue for that yet. But yeah, so we have each one of these is a step that you do, and it does a small thing, but they're all here in the same big source file. And now when we compile this file, it gets smaller. Yay! We'll find out how much smaller the first time we fly because I did not save off the KSM file yet. I've gone ahead and started to put variable names back large and comments in. Over time, I will refactor better comments back in. One of the things I had to do when I was trying to make things small was I started deleting comments. Never, ever delete comments. And of course, because everything keeps changing, I wasn't able to go back to the previous version of the code and just copy it forward. I suppose I could, at this point, roll the Git repository all the way back to where I had the original copies of these and do I refactor from there, but too much debugging has gone by. Now, what other debugging happened? Turns out when you compile a whole bunch of little modules, somehow some labels are getting reused. So sometimes when I would boot, as I would start loading up more and more things, as I started importing, my import list started looking a whole lot like this. Import launch, import stager, import ascend, and so on. And I get down, often was import deorbit or decell, it would, the kOS itself would crash. Message about a cannot, reused label in the compiled code somewhere. So I looked into that, and something weird about nested functions, something weird about function delegates, so I'm simplifying this. My new model for package is going to be a little bit less crisp than what Cheers Kevin was doing. Sorry, Kevin, I wasn't able to make it work. Put the whole thing in braces so that if you accidentally define something in global phase, or if you define, not even accidentally, if you define something just as a set or a function, it's inside the braces. It won't get exported to the global namespace. I'm keeping that. I am keeping that. The alternative is to just put all these functions at the global namespace and be done with it, let the global namespace get polluted to heck. I really don't like that. I don't like polluting the global namespace. I know this is a small project, and it will stay a small project because it will always be inside kOS. But darn it, I want to hold on to certain engineering principles. And you don't pollute your global namespace. I mean, we have decided to have a global import, and we've decided to have a global export. And if I could narrow that down to one global, I would, and I probably could if I had the if I had the import mechanism create a lexicon and pass it to the file, and the file would pack up the lexicon. But that makes the code look really awful. We may look at doing that at some point, but yeah, for now, we're just going to set up a scope. And inside that scope, we can declare functions and variables and all of that. Nothing will escape that scope until we tell it to. We get down to the bottom, and now we call export, and I'm going to just do the lex inline. The other way of doing this is create the lex at the top, which is kind of like getting it passed in. Think about that for a bit. I've actually tried that approach, and it works. It just looks ugly. And then each time you declare a function, you add it to the lex. If you want to be really terse about your naming, you could do add of the launch, and then you could put the whole thing in as a function delegate. But again, we were having problems in the compiled code with labels being reused, and all the hints I saw on the discussions from 5 years ago were talking about function delegates. I thought, let's do it clean. So this means that when you have an exported function, you're going to have the name of the function here, where you define it, whatever you call it, and it's going to be here. And then independently, you're going to have the name under which it's exported. These might be different. If they're different, okay. Now, the upside there is it's a real function, which means if there is any overhead in calling through a delegate, then your internal calls, so if one of these calls another one, you won't have that update. Yeah, whatever. It also means that we could do aliases. We could have two entries in the lexicon, different names, which call the same function if we wanted to. I'm not sure why we would want to do that, but there it is. May come in handy. So that's the number one change, is we made these functions. We stopped using quite so many delegates. Delegates where we want to, we'll use them, but I'm not going to force it everywhere. And I'll be restoring longer names and comments. So that's the overview of that one. The other change. What's the other big change? Farkos got pretty much the same treatment. It's inside braces, it does a whole bunch of things, and it has export at the bottom. Now the Farkos module, as opposed to the Farkos source code, the Farkos module still provides ST and EV. Those are old names. I used them all over in prior code. Keeping these names means I can continue to use that code. And if we're going to use it, I might as well get used to it. So Farkos::ST and Farkos::EV are our store file and event, respectively. Again, back to functions. To put import and export into the global namespace, this is the way I'm going to do it. I only do it for these two things. Maybe someday I'll do it just for one thing. If I ever want to refactor my modules to do things differently, this is the only place I touch. Well, here, and if it requires the modules to be written differently, I will have to do it in the modules as well. Meh. For instance, if I add a parameter to calling the module that is the lexicon to be filled in. We'll see. Currently, I only have the one module. I only have pof.ks. I've got a Go module, which nobody will ever open up. Oh, I really ought to put this in the correct form, huh? So we create that. We create a function Go, which has that line in it. And then we say export lex go. Yeah, so you can see that for really tiny modules, the new form is a little bit of extra overhead. But like we've seen, tiny modules don't interact well with the compiler, and they take up space. They're going to take up more space on disk as source because they're big. You know, I'm going to keep using good names, so they're not going to be minified. The KSM files don't get too small because there is overhead. So it's going to be a module has a bunch of functions rather than a module of just one function. Which means potentially we're going to be encouraging flights to put a lot of stuff in Go. Or maybe we'll just say the Go modules can be small. That's fine. We'll deal with it. Who knows? Maybe eventually the Go module, the flight control for the vehicle, is just a JSON file. Who knows? Maybe it's a JSON file that lists phases of flight it wants to execute and parameters for those phases and the order of the phases of flight. Maybe it's a data file. Maybe this is a data-driven system once we get there. We're not there yet. And this would mean that we would have to do something funky, you know, to say, well, instead of import Go and run it, we are going to pass control over to the mission system, which will then pick up phases of flight and so on. I think that's got it. Let's just quickly check in this change. Oh, test. You heard me say it. And I think I'm going to move my camera back over. I got the window in it. It's not really bright right now, but sometimes I can get a lot of light coming in the window, which does weird things. There we go. So now there's the camera on the right-hand screen, so that's what I'm facing when I'm coding, and there's KSP down there, so yeah, that works. So, I assert that with all of the changes I worked on, we have a working flight that can take 2 Kerbals up, at least one of whom is a pilot, and fly, orbit, and return from orbit. I can assert this because I've actually tested it. Yeah, this was the days of grinding I was mentioning earlier. Looping through and say, oh, this isn't quite right. Oh, that isn't quite right. Oh, that isn't quite right. Oh, the descent script is doing the wrong thing. Yeah, 15-minute flight. I've got a descent script that's not right. Oh, man. Okay, so we want to fly it, but it's going to cost us some money. What are our contracts? Currently, we have one contract, which is to orbit Kerbal. We can do that. But let's take up another contract. Let's see. Observational surveys are the go to a specific place. Those are best done when you have an airplane. Tourists. These tourists want to go on a suborbital spaceflight. That's great. We want to do a lot of tourists. I'm hoping that we can pick up every tourist contract that comes up. We've got some tests. These tests, we'll be able to do that once we get our telemetry of how fast do we go at what altitudes. I can start looking at those and say which ones do we fall into. I may end up writing a little bit of code that runs outside KSP that looks at my telemetry logs, and I can say, for instance, looking at this, do my ascent telemetry include passing between those altitudes, between those speeds? Which sections of it? So maybe say from this start time to that end time, I am satisfying both of these. I want to know, not just do I hit it, but am I spending long enough in there that I can get in and do the test? The other thing I want to try is, can I automate running that test? I think I can do that. I might need to open up the do action thing in the that strikes me as that may be a do action. Or do I can't open terminals because that's a career mode thing, yada yada. Anyway, so again, test is going to wait. Observations are going to wait. Any of these, if these were tests, test at splashdown, we can do those. Let's see, that's going to get us 14K. Meh. Let's see, 2 tourists. So this gets us about 12,000 funds for ferrying a tourist up and back. So we are going to bring up Farkos D2. Oh boy. Each launch costs us 18,000. With whatever funds we get back after the launch. Which means we have to send up 2 tourists. Which means I need a probe core on this thing. And we are at the part limit. So I would have to figure out a part to get rid of. So I can put a probe core on this. And currently, I'm only carrying 1 science part. I want to be able to carry a science part. Well, maybe this is a modular spacecraft where I can either have a probe core or a science part. Maybe. So we could do... Well, the problem then becomes, how do we build up funds in career mode while gathering science, because we can't take more than 1. Career mode is hard. No, we'll see. I do get some funds back after I land. It's probably not a lot, but let's close. Let's take a tourist up, and then we'll look at what happens to our funds. I will take notes on this. So we now have a contract to take up a tourist. That gave us some advance funds. So we're going to ignore the advance. That's already in our... Oh, this didn't give us an advance. Okay. Some of the other missions will give us an advance on our funds. So... this first flight, however, we will be achieving orbit. Hold on. What's our reward going to be for achieving orbit? That's going to throw off my thinking. So just getting to orbit is going to give us 48,000 funds. We already collected the advance. This is a one-time only thing. We can't do this contract over and over. So this first flight will get us something because we're doing something new. I'm thinking we're going to have to figure out a way to earn money. It is contract mode. You know, it is career mode after all. Well, let's go ahead and do this. Orbit with one tourist, and we'll look at what's happened to our funds. We'll save the game. We'll do a second orbit with the other tourist, and we'll look at if we manage to do it positive. I don't think I can earn money taxiing one tourist orbit at a time with this spacecraft. So, here we go. Farkos D2. We're going to have Valentina take up Mattis. There we go. And I'm not sure if I was looking at things that were behind my editor or not. Okay, so press go to launch. Are we ready? Valentina is excited. Let's do this. Okay, we launch. We rotate to point the correct direction. We pitch over just a little bit, and then we start our pitch program. This pitch program uses a highly rounded version of what I grabbed years and years ago from Cheers Kevin. So he worked out some very precise numbers, and the form is a constant pitch minus a scale factor times the fraction of your orbit distance to a power. And all three of those parameters were very precise. We used hill climbing to find what was optimal. So like 3 and 4 decimal points. What I'm doing right now is I'm saying take the ratio of my current altitude to the final altitude, 0 to 1. Make that 1 to 0. So we start out at 1, we linearly go down to 0. Take the square root of that. Okay? And the square root of that is our pitch from 1, and we start out at 0 pointing up, and we go square root of 0.5, you know, so the angle is the square root of the distance to the top, distance to orbit, scaled up to, 90 down to 0. So let me just go ahead and show that while we're just flying here. There's ascend. So yeah, much simplified version of the formula, 90 minus 90 times AF to the 0.5. I should probably write square root of AF. Let's do that. Hey, revert the flight. Try again with this new version of the code. So this makes it as simple as possible. In fact, how about 90 times min of 1, max of 0, that will clamp it, of 1 minus square root of AF. Now, I think that we can get rid of the min and max. Okay, there we go. Not sure why it's highlighting that. I have no idea why Visual Studio is highlighting that multiply operator. I'm sure that we will find out when I start my ascent. So we go over here. Oh, and I've been using the top module, and I shouldn't be doing that. So let's revert flight to vehicle assembly. Trying to keep things small, and I think I got there. Let's use it. So the internal one, which has limited space. Oh, it is doing that. Okay, so he is using boot.ks. And this guy, I will be turning this off at some point. He's got the huge disk space. He doesn't have a boot file. He's fine. Close. Hit the save button. Hit the launch button. So let's get our console open. We still can't automatically open the console. That's something that career mode gates behind other progress. But I can manually open it. Make sure you close the doors before launching. Now, I have had some problems with drag. And I believe I can point the camera. Yes, there we go. So my camera will now be pointed at the crew module rather than at the whole spacecraft. Crew module be centered. I think we're ready to go. We've got some test changes. We are testing this, but if everything works, this is a real flight. We're going to go up to orbit. We're going to gather some science. We're going to do some EVAs. So we're going to get the orbit. We're going to get whatever observations Valentina can make. We're going to run our materials science on orbit. In theory, we could stay in orbit and Valentina could make an EVA and grab science for every biome that she passes over. And equatorial orbit, that's quite a lot of biomes. But I think we're going to leave that mission for later. We don't want to perturb this one too much. I do want to get a bunch of science. So what other MechJet displays do I want going? Oh, flight recorder is kind of cool. Let's just toss that up over there. So left to right will be distance downrange, and this is going to be our altitude. I've got a pitch as well. So pitch will be 90 degrees at the top, and ASL is our altitude above sea level. Ascent stats is going to tell us how inefficient we are. Things like DV losses to gravity and to drag and to steering. I'm not sure what are good numbers for those. In fact, I'm so unsure of it, I'm going to go ahead and just kill that. Delta V stats. We should have popped this up to begin with and collected the main Delta V on the craft. What we can see is we have expended stage 3, stage 2, we're working our way through. This top stage, you notice that there's a design change here. I've got 5 fuel tanks in the bottom half of this and 5 on the top half. I'm not sure whether 50-50 split is optimal or not, but as I move the engine up and down the stack, this is the one that got me the most DV. That's the other thing. Kerbal is a lot about try something and try something else and, file to fit. So I kind of changed the number of fuel tanks up and bottom until I had enough DV, and maximized it out. Let's plot our angle of attack on here too. AOA peaked out at 15 degrees. If we were following a perfect gravity turn, our angle of attack would stay at 0. So angle of attack that is positive means that we are trying to fly above our trajectory. Now we have MECOD, which means angle of attack should go to 0. Let's turn off the angle of attack here. Oh. So the pitch angle is looking pretty good. I'm going to go ahead and turn that off too. The curve I'm interested in seeing is once we get up to orbit, what does this look like? Right now, that looks like a good gravity turn to me. So, vessel information. Could be useful someday. Delta V, I need to turn on Delta V from the start. I'm going to leave the orbit info up because I want to watch these. Apoapsis is at 72 kilometers, and those periapsis is still down near the center of Kerbal. So we basically burned, and all we did was raise our apoapsis. That should be efficient. So the next stage is, once we get near our apoapsis, we'll be burning to circularize. And this is my adaptive script. Do I still have my editor up? I do. There's the phase we're in right there in the editor. So it's not that we are selecting a circular orbit to be in and working our way to get there. We're just saying, if we were in a circular orbit right now, what would it look like? And then burn to adjust our velocity vector to match. And that's a really easy way to do it. So there's our total ascent curve. I'm not sure what it's supposed to look like optimally, but that looks nice and smooth to me. We've got maybe a kink there where we start moving faster and then we bellied out. I don't know. Maybe I could find some ascent curves for various real missions. So we are now on orbit. We have circularized. And indeed, the last HUD message that came up was activate RCS to continue. So you notice that Valentina and Mattis are just having the time of their life. So we are going to conduct a materials survey. This says, while in space near Kerbal, so we don't get to do a materials survey over every biome. Oh well. Keep that experiment and transfer the data up into the bucket, and then I should be able to close the doors. Oh right, transfer data, I need to click on the bucket, not just point at it. There. And now we close the doors. So there's our main science that we wanted to do. I don't have any small science here. We can open this up and look inside, but basically we've got a RCS. I'm not even sure that we need this. We may be able to sacrifice this one thing. I will try that. That would make it so we could put 2 tourists in the sky and maybe make a profit on a launch. Close. I'm hoping, though, that we can get some better science and we can build some cheaper spacecraft to get to orbit and earn some money by taking people to orbit and doing testing and so on. So here, let's see, we'll do a crew report. Crew report is in space near Kerbal. We've done one of those before. We did one on our first suborbital flight, so crew report isn't going to gate us anything. Valentina can go EVA. Whee! And takes an EVA report. in space above Kerbin's waters. So potentially we could do one of these in every biome, and that gets us 8 science per biome. So at some point, probably off camera, I will sit here in an inclined orbit and just go around and around and around and around to try to get one of these out of every biome. And figure out what biome you're in. Without add-ons, it's hard. And if I am aboard the spacecraft, I can ask MechJeb for surface info, and this will tell me what the current biome is. But I can't do it when Valentina is outside. So there will be no automating this. There'll be no hanging around outside and doing. What I'm going to have to do is just sit here and have Valentina outside and be looking at the ground, and when I see that I'm over a different kind of thing, I go ahead and do it. So we are going to store data. Whoops. Hey Valentina, how do you store your data? If I wanted to take a new EVA report, how would I do that? Can I take another EVA report? I think if I do that and enter, I have to dump the duplicate experiment. That's okay. I think I'm over land. EVA report above Kerbal shores. Oh, that's a good one, because the shores tend to be these strips. You fly over them really fast, so getting that one out of the way is good. It looks like I automatically load my EVA report into the reentry module. So what have we got here? We've got an EVA report and an EVA report. We don't want to discard the data. Okay, you have to hit keep on that. So the experiment storage unit has the collected data. So that's going to be important, because when we land, we're going to separate right here. So we're going to lose all of this when we land. Building a lander that has all the science on board is a pretty good idea. We're going to need it when we go to the Mun. But it means not using this P. Unless we avoid doing the final stage, in which case we have spent the resources to have something that has a built-in separator and a built-in heat shield. Oh, a heat shield's doing us no good. I don't have a way of running kOS on the P, ignoring the fact that I have changed the config files. When I restore the config files in a proper way, I won't have any way of running kOS on the P, which means I won't be able to automate deploying this parachute once he's done that. So we're already wasting his built-in heat shield. Hey, let's see if we can do another EVA here. Grasslands, let's keep it. I probably should have looked at something to figure out if we've gone around. So our descent profile, we burn until our periapsis is fairly low, and then glide in. I'm not sure what angle we make, but I think if I start landing maybe 90 degrees away from our launch site. Oh, that's desert. That's new. These used to be just, Easter eggs. You could land these and there would be something that looked like it, but I guess these are really launch sites now? Nice! Anyway, there's Kerbal Space Center, there's our island airfield. So we can continue sciencing for a bit. We got the grasslands. We may be getting into some other biomes here. Let's take a look. Highlands. We're just grabbing science like crazy. Yeah, this is not going to be a typical flight in terms of science return, because once we've done these, we've done them. We already have highlands. This looks like a different biome. So if I center the nav ball like that, I'll be looking directly down at whatever's underneath me, and that'll be the biome. I'm aiming for this dark area. I think that might be mountains. Of course, it could just be cloud cover. Oh, you know what I forgot to do? I forgot to write down how much funds I had at the beginning of the mission. Revert flight to launch. And now I'm going to start taking notes. So the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to declare that this is the official flight of Farkos D2. So universal time, let me bring up my editor on the screen here. There we go. Mission log Y1 D01 0530. We want to log starting funds. I should be logging the funds before I buy the spacecraft, shouldn't I? Revert flight to vehicle assembly. Let's get this honest. I think when I start, I'm going to actually warp to next sunrise, so we get a specific time that we're launching. So we're starting off with 1:30:872. And let's do a little engineering report here. Engineer's report. 30 of 30 parts. 31.853 tons out of 140. 18.4 meters high of 36 meters. 4.5 meters wide of 28 meters. And 3.1 meters of 21 meters long. So clearly width is this way. That's fine. Because my Kerbals are sitting so that this part of the ball here is up. So this, I'm looking at this spacecraft from the top right now. That's perfect. So Delta V report. Now we can copy it from here, or easier is I can ask MechJeb for its Delta V stats. Total is 3697 for atmospheric, or 4561 for vacuum meters per second. Stage 3, which is our launch, that's going to be entirely in the atmosphere. So this is 837 meters per second using a 175 ISP, 42.2 seconds for burn. Stage 2 will also be atmospheric. So this is 942 meters per second using a 265 ISP, burning for 63.3 seconds. Stage 1 is actually split. I'm going to use as vacuum numbers. These are all approximate because, of course, as you ascend, it's going to gracefully go from one to the other. So stage 2 and 3 will probably have more delta V than I'm logging here, but these are the nominal numbers. This is going to be 1917 VAC and /S. Notice that it's the same engine and the same fuel, but because we aren't lifting as much, it's double the delta V. So bear that in mind. And this is at a 250 ISP for 73 seconds. So the difference also is that we're running a less efficient engine, so we can get a swivel on it. So we have control over this. Now I wanted to show what happens to our numbers when I move one fuel tank top to bottom. So, same thing, but 6-4 split rather than 5-5. And we went from 3697 to 3689. So, very small change in total delta V. Very small. But it's there. Oops. I am going to need that. The other thing was, I am hypothesizing that I do not need this. Whoops. Apparently the science was attached to this guy. Boom. So that gets us one part available. We're going to have to rework the numbers here. So what do I need the one for? Oh, the probe core, so that I can put 2 tourists in there and maybe be able to make a profit flying 2 tourists at a time. So what probe cores do we have? Do I have a tiny probe core? Oh, this is our only probe core. And what does it do to our thrust to weight ratio if I put this on top? Well, first of all, I can no longer attach the parachute. That's too bad. It doesn't impact our delta V very much. So we could do this, but we need to arrange for a parachute. I don't know what that does to the aerodynamics. I can clip this anywhere, but I can't clip it anywhere because there's no attachment points available. Son of a gun. That is clipping to the max. So, yeah. Let's make sure that we aren't turning on kOS. So kOS on the, remember, all of the command cores have these debugging kOS cores in them, which I'm going to get rid of. Oh, I should have gotten rid of those before the stream. What I might want to do is have a specific part that has a debugging kOS core on it. Just declare one of them as having an infinite size core, so I can use that for development and debugging. Maybe I'll use the onion I have no idea if this is going to work. So this is true Kerbal engineering in action. I have put on a core so that in theory it can go. I don't know if I need a radio connection or not. This is wild. How are we doing here? Let's update our engineer report. We are at, let me set this up as a table. Parts, 30 of 30. Mass, 31.853 of 140. Size, height, 18.4 of 36. Width. These are uninteresting, but over the long run, maybe it'll be fun to have the information, so let's gather it now. Width is 4.5 meters out of a limit of 28. And height, length, 3.1 meters out of 28. Delta V report is stage, ISP, Atmos, Delta V, VAC, Delta V, and time. I have no idea how much of this I'm going to want. Stages 0, we're going to skip over stages that are zeroed out. So stage 2, oh, how about a TWR? There we go. So TWR of 2.38, 250, 1917, 2454, 73 seconds. Stage 3 is 1.49, 265, 942, 1102, 63.3. Now there is a technique called onion staging, where you have an engine with fuel above it, and then more fuel tanks around it that are cross-feeding fuel in, and you're discarding the outer tanks while keeping the engine. This is slightly more efficient than having an engine associated with each one of the tanks you're discarding. You're saving the weight of the engine. This assumes your engine is beefy enough to be able to support this. But what happens is this really screws up your Delta V tables. And I don't know if MechJeb handles that or not. 75 ISPs. See, the ISPs of the engines of the solid rocket boosters are lower. Atmosphere is 837, 1005. I won't be using solid rocket boosters in vacuum. So total, let's put total on a separate line down here. So the total is 3697 atmospheric, 4561 vacuum. Now, because I will be, as I said, moving from atmosphere to vacuum, these totals are not that important. But it is a way of monitoring when you change things in a vehicle, whether you're having a net positive or negative effect on the total Delta V, which is kind of an important budgetary thing, even though some of it will get lost. I think of this as we have a vacuum Delta V, and then we have losses because we're in atmosphere. These aren't drag. These are, you're in atmosphere, so your exhaust plume has it spreads differently, and it provides a different amount of force back to you. So if you're throwing stuff out into a pressurized environment, you're going to get less effective thrust out of your engine than if you're throwing it out into a vacuum. And one way of seeing this visually is by watching the angle at which it comes out. And as you go to vacuum, your rocket plumes tend to widen out. And in real life, you have to do things to the bell to make the bell of the engine match the optimum expansion. I learned all that from Scott Manley, not from NASA where I worked, from Scott Manley, the dude on the internet I was watching who was just so smart. So, yeah. Scott, if you're watching this, you are my hero. I was doing flight software at NASA on an unmanned mission while watching you play Kerbal Space Program and trying to play along in Kerbal Space Program at the same time. It was awesome, and I was learning stuff from my job, and I was learning stuff from you. So, Scott, thank you. Anyway, so there's the shout out to Scott. I owe him so many beers. Okay, so we've got our initial log information here. We know how much funds we have before we start. So let's put those funds 130872, and I'm going to, once I get outside, I'll log how much science we have and the other cool things. I don't see them here. What happened to my mouse cursor? Windows has killed my mouse cursor. My mouse batteries died. Okay, well, fortunately I have a charging pad that I can put it on. I have been going like crazy at it. I've got a charging pad for my mouse, but it's not in the best place for me to use as a mouse. Okay, so we're back. So we're looking for my initial funds. Which I've got, and I'm looking for my initial amount of science and everything. I believe I can get that out on the launch pad. Just in case, I'm going to go gather that stuff up. So let's save this craft. So what have we got here? I have 31.3 science. And there was one other thing you accumulate. Fame, reputation. I think it's this tape here. I think you can see that in the astronaut complex. We're still only seeing this tape. So how do you find out the number for this guy? Oh, I had forgotten about this. We have a listing of all of the science we've currently done. So we have gotten partial credit. Oh, Mystery Goo doesn't return 100%. It doesn't fill up the science. You can repeat Mystery Goo and pick up a little bit more. So let's see, what if we got partials on? Materials on the launch pad, Mystery Goo from the atmosphere and in the water, and flying, and recovery of a vessel. So all these will give us a little bit of science, not a whole lot. We currently have 31.3 science. The things we want, I want advanced rocketry because the Terrier will be our workhorse for orbital operations. What are these? Fireworks? There's got to be something they're useful for other than fireworks. Everything in this game has a purpose. Fuel tank adapter probably goes between smaller stages and larger stages. It's funny, I don't see anything here that tells me the radius of the part. I would expect that. So FLT 400, we've got FLT 100 and 200. So 400 means that we can replace 2 of our tank pairs with 1 tank. So this will reduce our part count. We need this. This is a liquid fuel engine that mounts radially. This means we can tweak our thrust by having more or having a higher or lower number of these engines, in addition to the axial mounted one. So we want advanced rocketry. General construction gets us struts, which will make our bendy boys less bendy. We can carry more crew. Well, tourists. We can pack tourists in these guys. So once we get a cabin, we can go crazy on tourists, but we need to have 45 science for general construction. Launch stability, so we get the larger craft. They will not be able to stand on their engines. We need this before we can build really big. Adapters, decouplers. I'm not sure what the engine plate is. Oh, I do see. Yeah, okay, there's scale right there, 1 meter. It's not telling us exactly what it is, but we should be able to tell the rough scale. Interesting, TD25 and TD18. TD18 may be a larger item. We'll have to check that out once we get there. Aviation. I'm not that good at doing aircraft, but I might have to learn. Have to pop up some 5-year-old Scott Manley videos and get my airplane chops going again, and maybe set up my flight control software to be able to pilot an aircraft. I'm not sure if I would ever get to the point where I could just tell my flight control software take me to a lat long altitude and have it fly there. But that would make a really cool goal, would be to able to autopilot to a latitude, longitude, and altitude. So once we've done with the 45s, our 90s, okay, we finally get a small core and we start getting our PV panels. So we get photoelectricity, we get lamps. The batteries and solar panels are the important part. Now what we have right now is just have these small batteries that recharge from engines. So 90 science is going to be required to get us our solar panels. Miniaturization. What? Goop ED monitor. Well, you have left some mystery goose sitting around in weird radiation. This is a cargo part that can be placed. So you deploy a power unit and a central station and a Goob ED monitor. I'm suspecting that this is something you place on a surface somewhere and it returns science by bubbling mystery. Oh, that's new to me. Okay, EVA experiments kit. I think this is something they carry that makes their EVA go better. We'll have to find out. This is cool. Stack separators, adapters. Okay, miniaturization. Didn't have the things I expected it to have, but it does have a docking port. So this is where I think these are parts that we're going to need when we start doing manned missions to Mun. Okay, this one at 90 gets us cargo storage, repairs. So storage and repairs so far. Hitchhiker, this is again a place where we can put tourists. Ladders, important for getting in and out of the spacecraft. And more destination stuff. Oh, Rove Max. If we had this, we could build a little cart that we could roll around and get a whole bunch of science from looking around. We could probably, well, once we get aviation, we can build a airplane, in quotes, which doesn't fly, but does roll around, so we can gather science by observing around KSP. Or Kerbal Space, yeah. Okay, advanced flight control. So let's see, more mech jab, stronger. This is a reaction control system, RCS wheels, enter can. We've got monoprop. Start getting RCS jets, which use monoprop. It's one of those circular onions. It's got a crew capacity of 3. And the Mark II command pod. So this is kind of like our Mark I pod we've been using since day one. There's Mark I. And there's Mark II. So Mark II has a crew capacity of 2. This looks like they resurrected an ancient part. The visual style is different. Neat. I know some of the old original models were well thought of. And again, 90 for landing. Gives us landing struts and landing gear and more heat shield and an XL parachute. So this is something where we can then parachute something bigger. We do have radial parachutes already. We can use several of those, or you can use one of these, or use a combination. Launch escape system. I have used these from time to time. They're great for large rocket stacks. If you're playing in a save where you've said, I am never going to revert. So when things explode, you accept that they've exploded, and your Kerbals die, except you have a launch escape system, so when things explode, they activate the launch escape system, and you can maybe not have them die. I'm pretty free about reverting, so I probably won't use the LES. So the reason why I'm going through these is I'm trying to plan out where I'm going to go, because I have a limited amount of science and funds that I can obtain before I need these guys to go further out. I mean, we've got biomes on Kerbal. We can collect science from around the station, around the launch pad, and around the science center. We can fly around Kerbin to the various biomes and get science at each biome and over each biome and space over each biome. We're going to get to a limit. And at some point, we're going to start getting contracts that we can't do. We're going to end up looking at contracts in the contract center where we have no contracts we can run for money, and we're going to start running short on money and not be able to launch. That's the failure condition for KSP in career mode. So, what is the first thing we want to go for? It's got to be either general construction, which gets us send more Kerbins up, or advanced rocketry, which gets us a better on-orbit engine, and other things we can do. So these two. If I can't get to 90 science, I'm going to have to decide which one to go to first. Anyway, back to our log. All that because I wanted to see how much science and reputation we had. We still, I don't know how much reputation or fame or whatever it is. We're in the green. I don't know if there's any reason to have this go higher. I do know that if you go lower, there's bad things that happen. Maybe people cost more to hire. But I've put it off. It's time to launch. So 130,872 funds. And we put a core out there, so I should be able to put both tourists in. There, you. Okay, with 2 tourists, We won't be able to do the EVA dance, which means it's going to be a separate flight where we have Kerbals go out and do EVA. That's fine. We may have to tweak a future flight to have just one Kerbal. Maybe change the top to have only one. Maybe that'll make it cheaper. And just go nuts on the science. Just absolutely go ham on the science. Now, let's see if we can do 2 tourists and get a positive cash flow out of this. Now, if the spacecraft is not controllable, KSP will warn us. It will say, you don't have a probe core, and so on. Well, we do have a probe core, so we should be controllable. And there's our press go to launch. So we should be golden. I'm going to assume that I can gather some material science on orbit. That's going to really be the only science thing I do. So, cross your fingers, and we launch. I'm going to go ahead and heave the MechJeb Delta V stats where they can be seen. So we are an hour and a half into the stream. Oh, I was going to launch at sunrise, wasn't I? Revert flight to launch. Okay, so trying this again. So we have a predictable launch time. I'm going to warp to sunrise. There we go. So universal time. This is year 1, day 2, 04:30. I'll do it 04:35 is when I will start. So before launch, you can't see that behind my picture, but we have 112620 funds. Okay, we are go for a launch at 04:35 universal time. We have no crew control. We do, however, have a completely automated mission system that only requires me to toggle RCS once during the flight to say, yes, you can come home. So essentially, we've given Mattis and Madeley a big red button that says, once you've had enough of orbit, push this button. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, launch. Haha, silly me. If I've got no crew control, I can't manually stage to initiate the launch process. Revert flight to vehicle assembly. Oh, which means I want to set up my Farkos D2 so that it automatically launches at a specific time. So, and Farkos D2 go.ks. You know, I think I'm not going to have much of a choice here. How about instead of, uh, yeah, I'm going to put in some code here to see if I can do something here. So, let's see. Okay, and let's make sure RCS is off for that. I don't know if this is going to work. And that is something I will say a lot when I'm working with kOS. Okay, so here we go. Can I toggle RCS? If I can't toggle RCS, it means I have to make the flight control for this spacecraft completely autonomous. And we have a crash. So I have to open this up and look at what's going on. So you don't see it. I will move it out here where you can see it. My mistake was that I'm calling into the Farkos module here and I didn't import it. Because I had reduced the Go script down to where it didn't actually do anything. There we go. And now we can power down and power back up. And it says activate RCS to launch. And I can indeed activate RCS even when there are no pilots. So Mattis and Natalie are on their way to orbit. Whoops. Close the doors, Pat. Hal. Close the pod bay doors, Hal. And my coffee mug is empty. Trust me on that. So I am going to go grab coffee while we are doing our nice clean ascent phase, totally without interaction from the pilots. There's the staging. There's the boosters slamming into each other and exploding behind us. This is stage 3, pushing us on upwards towards orbit. So we are at 15 kilometers and our apoapsis is already 20. So the idea is we're pushing the apoapsis out ahead of us. How far out ahead of us it is will depend typically on what our thrust-weight ratio is. So the faster we accelerate, the further it pushes out ahead of us. I seem to remember that the best rocket designs are the ones where you are thrusting all the way up to orbit. You're running your engines out full all the way up to orbit. And this is most efficient because you are running only as much engine and only as much fuel as you need for that stage. So real life, you get all sorts of tweaks. Kerbal Space Program, we have specific engines of specific design. We don't get to design anything custom. Now in real life, you don't always get to design something custom either. Hey, there we go. MECO at 40 kilometers. So at 40 kilometers, our apoapsis was 73 kilometers. And top of the atmosphere is 68 something. Now, remember early on I removed a reaction wheel. So right now our only attitude control is whatever gyros happen to be in the P. I am beginning to suspect that the P doesn't have any reaction wheels whatsoever. You're killing me. And my circularization script leaves the engine at 0 when you're not pointed in almost the right direction. So if we don't get any engine control at circularization, this is a no-go. I need to sacrifice one part to get back a wheel that can give us some control over our vehicle, or I need to modify circularization to always run 1% engines. Let's do the second one. Let's see if we can fix it in software. Revert flight to launch. Actually, revert to vehicle assembly. So the other thing I'm thinking is, instead of this activate RCS to launch, I think what I'm going to do is set this up to activate when I hit a specific time of day. Let's see. I don't remember whether Universal Time has sunrise at the same time every day or not, or if it advances through the year. Hold on. I am actually going to allow my browser to show up on the screen. Cross your fingers for me. I really, this is a big yikes, but let's go ahead and do this. Let's see. Sources. Plus. Application capture? What is application capture beta? Well, it's not brought up anything. Okay, so the OBS application capture didn't actually create anything on screen. I'll fiddle with that later. It is beta, but I can do a window capture. And we are, oops, cancel, come on, what's going on here? Window capture. Why does it think I have a window somewhere? There we go. Badonkadonk. There's our kOS manual. Let's find the information about time. I'm basically looking at, is there a way for me to robustly make a launch, say an hour after sunrise or something. Time of sunrise on Kerbal. Well, Google to the rescue. On Kerbal, the first sunrise occurs at 4 hours 13 on day 1, and the 209th occurs at 1 hour 8. Okay, sunrise, sunset is precisely 6 hours, so 6 hours should be the sunrise to sunrise period. Now, sidereal, which is rotation with the stars, is going to be different. Fine, yeah, okay. Starting 105, Kerbal's sidereal period is that. Huh. So, let's see. 6 hours. So 6 hours precisely would be 21,600. So before 1.0 the day was 59 hours, 59 minutes, 59 seconds. Whoa! I think that was a bug. Well, let's see what it currently says in the wiki rather than on that old thread. Craters, biomes, atmosphere, exotic flight, orbits, reference frames. We have all sorts of great stuff here, which plays into equations that I have. So the solar day is indeed 6 hours. Or 5 hours, 59 minutes, and 60 seconds. Somebody automatically computed that and rounded badly. So we have 6 hours, and sunrise is at 0430. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have launch at 0500. I'm going to try to have launch at 0500. Let's see if I can get the current time. Time. So I can get the timestamp. Now seconds converts a timestamp into a scalar universal time. Timestamp can give me, I can create a timestamp from numeric year, day, hour, min, seconds. Okay. The question is, can I extract numeric things from it, or do I have to do the math myself? I'd rather extract from it, because there may be calendar things like at zero, what's the zero universal time? What is it? Well, we can check that. But before we do, timestamp represents simultaneous time. Hold on. The headset's beeping at me. So in timestamp, we get back. We do have these. So I can pull this over here, pull up coding. So local now is time colon. Well, let's see here. Is there a way to pull current timestamp, or do I need to do timestamp of time? Special variable time returns a timestamp. Let's see. Hour. So what I want to do is find the next 4:30 a.m. I know that's a 6-hour day. Let's see if I can do it manually. Local now S is now colon seconds. That should give us floating point seconds. Local now SS is now S. Oh, is there a modulo? Is there a modulo function in Kerbal? Mathematics, scalar operators. I think. Okay, so that allows me to warp to 0430. Well, so we're going to wait until hour is 4. Wait until it's 3 first. So if it's 4:45, I'm going to wait until the next 4 a.m. Global T0 is now colon seconds. Actually, let's do. Oh, I would have to lock this. Okay. So let's schedule the liftoff for another 30 minutes from here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say POF launch at T0. So we're going to have a optional parameter to launch, which will be when we want to launch. This is going to take some changes. Azimuth, altitude, phase. What? Wait. Did I? No, I'm going to have to wait and stage here. I will have to look up basic math functions, try to figure out truncation to integer and modulus and div and so on. We do have floor and ceiling. Hold on, I'm finding it here. Oh, we do have mod. Okay, so we got floor, ceiling, and mod. Long term, I want T0. Remember, we're doing a lot of yak shaving here. I still want to get back to writing our storage, but this funds is just driving me nuts. So let's just do 04 something or other. Wait until time, minute is greater than 28. Set warp to 0. Stage. Actually, let's greater than 20. So this will try to launch at 0430. We do not need now. I don't even, my famous last words, I don't know if this is going to work. Okay, so we've done that, and we've done that. Move those so I can see. And now this should be, well, if we want to do it completely unattended, so what I really want to do instead of pause, there, let's have pause take a optional parameter, which is a time to pause in seconds. QF. So now we're going to say if duration is greater than 0, then wait duration return. Okay, so now if I am coding things up and I'm saying phase of flight is pause, parameter is whatever, I can include in a data file whether I'm pausing for input or pausing for a fixed duration. Dunk, kill VS Code, and now this should be completely hands-off. Completely. Let's see if it works. I'll bring up a terminal. Open. Open terminal. Launch scheduled for 0430 UT. It is now 0531. Close. So I should be able to warp to sunrise. Oh, and apparently during the warp it aborts the program. Why does it do that? Because I completely ran out of electric charge. So sitting on the launch pad like this, I can run out of electric charge. That's new. So we can't simply sit on the launch pad forever. I will keep the pause the way it is, but that means that my hack up launch thing, print launching in 1 minute, wait 60, set warp 20. Okay. We'll figure out launch timing later. I have modified the program to simply wait 60 seconds. And now we can revert flight to launch. That's too bad. I think when we get the launch stabilizer, I think that provides power. So we'll need either the launch stabilizer or solar panels or something before we can sit on the launch pad and wait for a given time. Open him. Open terminal. Launching in 1 minute from unspecified time. Oh, that's something else we can do is we can replace EV and have this effective everywhere. Have it include a timestamp when it puts it on the console, so we know how long ago that was. But I do know that it's going to cancel warp, so let's go ahead and warp forward. And it says press go to launch because I didn't do a stage in my code. There. And just in that time we've been sitting there, my resource panel is behind my camera location. I can move my camera down. Actually, let's make me the same size as the Kerbals. There. Little teeny picture of Greg down there. So Greg is this guy at Mission Control who's controlling your software. There, and kind of out of the way. So we can now see that the short time I've been messing around, we've used up maybe 5 electric charge. That's fine. Let's open the doors. And I'm going to want to be able to cycle power on him. Close the service bay doors, Hal. Toggle power. Badonkadonk. Launching in 1 minute. Let's warp to it. Notice I had set warp to 0 followed by a delay. It sometimes takes time, or at least it did. I remember having issues with changing my warp and immediately trying to exert control. So I like to reduce the warp to 0 and then have some time for everything to kind of stabilize. We can't turn off the coding because this time it's just gonna work. So tourists, Mattis and Madeline, heading up to orbit. There goes the solid rocket boosters, and there they go, boom. Now, if I'm going to have my camera in the lower right-hand corner of my screen, I could put my camera down here. Maybe? Is that a better angle? That'll do. that's got that bright window from behind me. I really do have to put it off to the side. Oh well. Okay, there's that tumble again. I was going to fix that by having the circularization always run the engine at 1% early on. Based on okay, let's fix that so I have some engine thrust. Oh, hello VS Code. So, the way I'm going to fix this is that the engine throttle error, the error based on the angle being the AE, so max 0, max facing error minus AE. So what I want is for this to be 0.01. Actually, it's 5. So 100% of what we want when we're facing the right way. And then as we turn away from that, it'll roll down. It was rolling down to 0, and I'll just roll that down to 1/20th of the desired thrust. There we go. Revert flight to launch again. So this is actually the same kind of process I've been going through the last couple of days to debug. I thought I had something that worked. I didn't realize there was going to be a problem with the funds not being sufficient. So, one more time. The alternative is we have to sacrifice a part somewhere in order to get a reaction wheel. And we need 225,000 funds to upgrade the VAB so we can put more than 30 parts on this thing. And right now, with the science we have, 30 parts is just enough to get us to orbit and back safely. There's got to be a way of doing this in small. I remember orbiting and coming back safely with fewer. Fuck. It didn't do that last time, did it? I wasn't watching. Did it do that last time? I want to see that again. Because that's not right. I didn't change anything at all about it. I thought I had a clean launch. Now that's really not right. Revert flight to vehicle assembly. This is supposed to be repeatable, especially this launch phase, which is completely automated. Oh, I know what happened. I hit spacebar and it launched because you can use spacebar when there's a core. Somehow. And the launching in 60 seconds was not on the screen. That was my goof. So that second launch just before this, was not under flight control. It was just kind of going. So now we're under flight control. And this ought to reproduce what we just saw with it going bendy and flipping over at the wrong time. I am almost completely sure that I was doing launches with shorter vessels that were getting to orbit and back. I don't know, maybe I do remember doing the whole roll around the space center to observe everything everywhere I could kind of thing. It could very well be that I never tried to orbit this early in the science. Okay, so clearly I'm being more aggressive with what I want to do at a given science level, and that camera really is not going to work where it is. Back up to the top with you. So I am trying to go into orbit with less science than I've done before, clearly, because I remember smaller, more capable craft. I also remember using the smaller engine, which means I was getting to the smaller engines before trying to get to orbit, which means I was getting all that science by running around the space center. I don't want to do that. I especially don't want to do that on stream. But if I have to do it, I'll do it. Okay, so there's our tumble because we don't have the reaction thrusters. We don't have any attitude control at all. So here's our information. Comm signal, hop distance. Command state is tourists need crew. That's interesting. kOS information. We're not using the kOS module. In camera, transfer crew. Yeah, I think that these onions don't have any attitude control on them. I am going to have to clip a reaction wheel into that onion to get attitude control out of it, or I do want to use the onion to send up 2 tourists. I can go back to the normal capsule. Okay, that lit up at 100% right away. So my off-axis thrust reducer is broken. I tweaked the thrust. Oh. Yeah, I didn't put enough thought into my KA. So, maximum facing error minus the angle error coming down to 0 divided by max facing error. No, that should have worked. So the other thing that's happening here is another frustration. We are burning radially to try to get a circular orbit. We are already in a circular orbit. What the frick is going on here? Oh, initiating deorbit. We're trying to deorbit now. Okay. And that's going to run our engine at a slow rate until we slew around to point retrograde. This is okay. So that's why it kicked off the low levels. That the deorbit is the place where I did have it set up so that it would always do at least what I wanted. So that's working. I'm going to call this a good flight. I'm going to call this a good flight. We're going to accept this. We're going to do a recovery at the end of the mission, but I want to fix my circularization properly. I could do that right now while we're waiting for this to deorbit. So I'm not going to do KA. I'm going to have KA be honest and drop to 0 if indeed we're faced wrong. But what I am going to do is I'm going to say while we are doing circularization, we always have at least 1% thrust. So I believe this is the same figure I used for deorbit. Yes. So deorbit also says CT goes from 0.01 to 1. I do this min-max a lot. I really ought to have a clamp function. Yeah, let's see here. Now, let's not refactor this in the middle of a working flight, because how often do I use this? I could clamp a lot of things and get more. That's the thing about embedded software, is often you want to say, well, I only want this variable to be in this range, and if I compute a value that's out of range, I want to put it at its rail. Yeah, clamp is a thing. So now I can say clamp minimum maximum value. And this is going to be a significant change, which means I really cannot accept this as a flight. So let's revert to vehicle assembly while I refactor clamp into all of this crap. Okay, so first off, we're going to use EV to present this message so I can see it, because I'm not opening a terminal. Then inside POF, let's make clamp global. So anybody anywhere, so we're now polluting our namespace, but I think that clamp is as much of a first-class function as min or max. So we're going to provide it from Farkos. When we load Farkos, it's going to be there, but it's not going to be part of the package. It's just going to be clamp. So what do we want to clamp? Well, first thing is my mouse is beginning to go crazy, so I am going to stop the stream until my mouse recharges. Goodbye. Stopping the stream is fairly difficult when your mouse is not